What's up everybody, welcome to MyPixel. As always, it's awesome to have you here. If you're new to the channel, then welcome. Today we're adding a parallax background to our game. Now most of you probably already know what a parallax background is, but for those of you who don't, then I'll simply say that you probably want one. So let's jump right in and I'll show you how to make one. Once again, I've gone ahead and made the stage bigger so that we can better see the effects of the parallax background. I've also added some platforms here that we can jump on so that we can get the game camera to follow us upward. With this, we'll be able to see the effects of the parallax background moving both horizontally and vertically. I've also had to adjust the camera limits. Those are the camera limits on our camera 2D for the player. If you remember from last episode, down these camera limits, I've had to adjust those to match the dimensions of our newly enlarged stage here. So at this point, if you want, you can go ahead and make the stage larger. I'll just go ahead, pause the video, make the stage larger, and I will wait right here until you're done. Okay, you're all done? Great. Then let's go on to the next step. We're going to need to add a few objects to our stage 1 scene to make this work. So let's just get into our stage 1 scene here. Start adding our objects. The first object we're going to add is called a parallax background. If we type in parallax, we see the parallax background up here. So go ahead and add that to your scene. And as a child of the parallax background, we're going to add a parallax layer. Go ahead and add that. Then as a child of the parallax layer, we're going to finally add a sprite. Okay, so you should have it like you see here, right? A parallax background, a child of that parallax layer, child of that is a sprite. For the sprite, we're going to need to add a texture. For that texture, we're going to go ahead and add the sprite for the background. Okay. In this instance here, I've prepared a sprite for the background. It's this file here. Okay. Now the background sprite that I've prepared is 2 times the height of our game window. It's exactly 2 times. So our game window was 180 pixels. This is 360 pixels high. This will ensure that the game camera can move at least up to twice the height of the game screen before I run out of a background image to show. Today, I want to make sure that the background image is both flush with the bottom limit of our game screen and the left limit of our game screen. So to do that, we'll have to go into Sprite. And then if we go to, where is it here? Offset. If we uncheck Centered, we can get it flush with the left side of the game screen. That takes care of that. Now we just need to fix our vertical placement. We can fix the vertical placement by adjusting this offset. Right, so this offset is your X and Y axis or axes. We don't have to do anything to the X, that's fine. And for the Y, I already know it's double the height of our game screen, so I need half of the height of our game screen, which is, I want to take this image and move it up, right? So I'm doing a negative 180 pixels. After that, we have it flush with the left side and bottom, just like we want. Now, how about we just try and run the game and see what we have? Run the game here. Okay, so right, we've got that background image like we'd expect. Right, the game camera now follows us up. Okay, so what do we have exactly? We don't have much after all of that, okay? But with this, we can see what we're missing. So what are we missing? First of all, this game, the foreground and background, scroll through at exactly the same speed, right? That's not very parallax backgroundy. Okay, so that's problem 1. Problem 2 is the most obvious, is that we have no background here. As soon as our background image ends, we don't have any more background to show. All in all, pretty lame right now. So we're going to need to go ahead and fix that. So let's jump out of our game. The first thing we're going to fix is the problem with our background just cutting off in the middle of the stage. I think that's the most obvious problem. So let's tackle that one first. Now, what you could do is you could simply create a bigger background sprite, one that would take up the whole stage. You could add more sprite objects and basically tile it across the stage, but there's a better way to do that. Say you want this tree to, you're fine with this tree occurring, right, being tiled across the stage. Godot has an easy way to do this. It's called mirroring. So to use that, we need to go into our Parallax layer. And if we expand this motion here, this motion section, there's a item called mirroring. So if we go into it, we have settings that we can make on the X and the Y axis. Now, what we're going to do here is this background image is 320 pixels wide. If we type in 320 here, what that says is that after it shows 320 pixels of the background, it will restart that image. It's going to show it again. So if we type in 320 and just hit enter, then we get another one. It shows us another one. Now what this does is it actually makes it so that no matter how far you run, this tree picture will be tiled across the whole stage. In the editor, it only shows it being tiled once, but when we run our game, it'll be pretty obvious that it actually tiles the whole stage, right? So about halfway through our run, we don't have anything else, but when we run our game, we'll see it. So let's run our game. Let's try it again, run our game. Okay, and let's book it across our stage. We have one tree in each background image. So that's 1, 2, and you'll see it's not going to cut off. It keeps tiling it. That's the third tree. I got nothing else after here. We can just run. We'll see the fourth tree. And I think we'll eventually hit the wall. Yeah, there we go. So as you can see, even though it only shows the 2 tiles of background in the editor, it'll actually tile infinitely. In this instance, I couldn't tile the tree upwards because it just wouldn't make sense. But if you wanted to, you could always set the tiling or the mirroring on the y-axis also, and that would work. So let's jump out of our game. Now, since we have a proper background that covers the entirety of our stage, we need to make it a real parallax background. So let's go ahead and do that. For that, we're going to go under our parallax background object in our stage 1 scene. Okay, we don't need this canvas layer stuff. We'll expand this scroll section here, and we have a bunch of stuff in here. Under base scale, let's click inside of here. Let's start off by setting, instead of 1, you're going to set it to 0.5 and 0.5. And then we're going to go ahead and run our game and see what we get. And if you haven't noticed already, we actually, just with that, we have a working parallax background. As you can see, the foreground and the background are moving at different speeds, which is basically the definition of a parallax background for those of you who didn't know what it was when we started this tutorial. It gives you this illusion of 3D happening as the background elements move more slowly than the foreground elements. Now, the speed at which the background moves is adjustable by just changing the value of the base scale that we had set before we ran the game. So why don't we go ahead and set it to something else and see what happens. Go back into our base scale. Let's go ahead and set this to 0.1 instead of 0.5. 0.1. And then let's see what we get when we run our game. Okay, move along in our stage, and we see we can move pretty far, and that tree in the background is just barely moving. It must be a gigantic tree, because yeah, it's it's hardly moving at all. We can see the new tree coming into view very, very slowly, as if it's very far into the background. Now the default base scale setting was 1 and 1. We'll just change it back here. 1 and 1. So what that means is, well, first I have to actually change it back. Let's see if that'll take this time. Okay, 1 and 1. We'll run our game again. And then what do we have? We had something where the background moved exactly the same speed as the foreground. So what 1 and 1 means is 1 stands for 100%. If we have 1 and 1, it's going to mean that our background will scroll at exactly 100% of the speed of the foreground scrolling. It's 1 and 1, so this is going to occur on both the X and Y axes. When we set it to 0.5 and 0.5, that's going to be a 50% speed. As we saw the background move, I thought it looked pretty nice at 0.5. It depends on what you like. And then after that, we set it to 0.1 and 0.1, which is a 10% speed. Right, which we just saw. We saw the tree moving very slowly in relation to how far we are traveling in the stage. It's a 10% speed. So if you want, you can actually set the X and Y axis differently. You could set it, let's say for a parallax effect, maybe you only wanted it to occur on the X axis. Let's say you set it to 0.5, and maybe you didn't want any parallax to happen on the Y axis. You could set it to 1. And then on the Y axis, it would, what would it do? Well, why don't we run our game and see? Then we can see on the Y axis, it's going to travel up and down at the background and the foreground travel up and down at exactly the same speed. But it's 50% speed on the X axis. You could also do something like, you could set the Y axis to some unbelievably small number here. And that's basically 1%. And then when we jump up and down, that tree will basically appear to stand still. I don't think that looks quite right, but if that's a look that you're going for, or maybe it works in a particular situation that you're implementing, then great. But those are all things that you can adjust to your liking. Right, so feel free to play around and see what works for you. Today we are able to give our game a parallax background that allows us to take our 2D games up a notch. And again, we managed to do this without any additional code. Pretty cool, right? Parallax backgrounds allow you to bridge that gap between 2D and 3D games by adding a sense of depth through the separation of the foreground and background. So, for those of you who didn't already know what it was before we started, now you know, and hopefully you can see how easy it is to implement, and you want to implement one yourself because it's pretty cool. And that's going to do it for today, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I really hope you found this helpful. If you liked today's video, please give it a like and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. As always, the project folder for today's episode and all other episodes in this tutorial series are available on my Patreon page. If you don't already know, the project folder contains all the sprites, source code, and everything else that you need to recreate what you've seen in this tutorial today. In fact, the only thing you have to do is load up the project folder and hit the play button. So if you want to check that out and also support the channel, the link will be in the description. And with that, we'll call it a day. So thanks again to everybody for watching out there, and I'll see you in the next one real soon. Take it easy.